In my last life, my sister married a man from a wealthy family, while I married a man with nothing to his name. A year after our weddings, her husband's family went bankrupt, and my husband became the wealthiest man in the country. She tried to come back to our parents' house, demanding a divorce from her husband, but on the way, she was in a car accident and died. When I opened my eyes again, my sister and I were both transported back to the time just before we were engaged. Our parents presented two very different paths for my sister Isabelle and me. One option was to marry Leo Sterling, making one of us the future daughter-in-law of the powerful Sterling Enterprises, destined for a life of unimaginable wealth. The other was to marry Daniel Vance, a young man whose grandfather had once saved our father's life. The Vance family, however, had fallen on hard times and had little social standing left. I kept my eyes down and said nothing, knowing that my father's offer of a free choice was just for show. In reality, I would have to take whichever man Isabelle didn't want. "Dad, I want to marry Daniel Vance," Isabelle announced with unshakable firmness in the middle of our living room. I stared at her, completely stunned. In our previous life, she had chosen Leo without a moment's hesitation. Our parents' reaction was even more severe. My mother rushed to Isabelle's side, her voice filled with anxiety. "Izzy, what are you talking about? Daniel is a poor boy. If it wasn't for his grandfather helping your father back in the day—" She trailed off, glancing nervously at our father, who looked deeply uncomfortable, his lips pressed into a thin line. Our family, the Morgans, were a respected name in the city, and my father was fiercely protective of his reputation. It was common knowledge that his early success was only possible because of the Vance family's support. To repay this debt, he had casually promised that one of his daughters would one day marry into their family. Now that the Vances had lost their influence, going back on that promise would make him look ungrateful and lose him face. At the same time, the Sterling family presented a golden opportunity. Leo's grandmother, the matriarch of Sterling Enterprises, was a firm believer in fortune and destiny. She had somehow acquired the birth charts for both Isabelle and me, and had become convinced that we were destined to bring immense prosperity to our husbands. She had reached out to my father, hoping to secure one of us as a wife for her grandson. Isabelle had always been the favorite, the golden child our parents doted on for 20 years. Naturally, they wanted her to marry into the Sterling family and live a life of ease. "Mom," Isabelle pouted, tugging on our mother's sleeve. Leo's health has always been delicate. If I marry Daniel, at least our family's honor is upheld without worry. Just let Chloe marry Leo instead. Our mother, unable to resist her pleas, finally gave in, agreeing to let her marry into the Vance family. I watched my sister with a cold sense of clarity, realizing that her strange reversal meant only one thing. She had been reborn, just like me. In our past life, Isabelle had eagerly married into the Sterling family, only to discover that Leo was a full 10 years older than her. She had always liked charming, younger men, and Leo was quiet and reserved. Their marriage was never even consummated. Shortly after their wedding, Leo's grandmother made a series of disastrous business decisions that crippled Sterling Enterprises. Leo fought desperately to save the company, securing what he thought was a lifeline deal, but it turned out to be a trap set by his partners. The company was pushed to the edge of collapse. Isabelle, who had only ever known a life of luxury, couldn't cope with the sudden loss of fortune. Meanwhile, my life took the opposite trajectory. After I married Daniel Vance, his career took off. He climbed the business ladder with stunning speed, eventually eclipsing even the struggling Sterling family to become the most powerful and sought-after man in the city. I gave birth to his son, and my position as the wife of the new king of industry was unshakable. Other high society wives admired me, and even my own father began to treat me with a new, fawning respect. The contrast shattered Isabelle's spirit. She had no real feelings for Leo and eventually ran back to our parents' home, throwing a tantrum and demanding a divorce. When Leo's grandmother heard that the family was facing ruin and her granddaughter-in-law was abandoning them, the shock caused her to collapse. The whole affair became a juicy piece of gossip among the city's elite. My father, a man obsessed with status, had been willing to marry me off to a poor man to save face. But he would never allow Isabelle to bring such shame upon the family by leaving the Sterlings now. He hired two men to drag her back, but tragically the car crashed on the way. Isabelle died at the scene. As for me, I also had an accident that same day. The moment I lost consciousness, I never imagined I would wake up back here at the very beginning. I gripped the armrest of my wheelchair, my knuckles white. In this new life, perhaps trading places with Isabelle wasn't such a bad thing after all. I sat in my wheelchair, a little lost in thought, staring up at the ceiling. Suddenly, Isabelle's face appeared above me, her lips curved into a triumphant smile. "Chloe, you're about to marry into a rich family," she said. "Are you excited?" I looked at her coolly, about to reply when a familiar tightness seized my throat. I instinctively grabbed a tissue and covered my mouth, coughing violently. It took a long moment for the nauseating sensation to pass. When I finally lowered the tissue, it was stained with a bright, glaring spot of red. Isabelle stared at the crumpled tissue in my hand, her eyes blinking. Her lips parted as if she wanted to say something, but in the end, she just turned and walked away, her steps seeming flustered and uncertain. A shadow crossed my face as I watched her go. She and I were once inseparable. But from birth, I was diagnosed with a congenital weakness that made every day a struggle. Just walking a few steps left me breathless, confining me to a wheelchair for most of my life. I couldn't attend school like other children. My family hired tutors to teach me at home. I had no friends, and my personality became quiet and withdrawn. Isabelle, on the other hand, was always bright and cheerful, and my mother adored her for it. In contrast, she barely hid her dislike for me, often complaining to my father that I was gloomy and never had a sweet word to say. Isabelle, being a child, quickly picked up on this difference in treatment. She learned to please our parents to earn prettier dresses and better toys, and a distance grew between us. Spoiled and favored, her first instinct upon returning to this life was to grab the good fortune I had experienced in the last one. What she didn't know was that marrying into the Vance family was no stroke of luck. It was true that Daniel would one day rise to dominate the city's business world, but at that moment, his family consisted only of him and his widowed stepmother. After Daniel's grandfather passed away, our families had lost almost all contact. Before my first wedding, I had no idea that his widow was his stepmother, a woman who had married his father when she was just 18 and he was 8. 7 years later, his father died unexpectedly. His stepmother, then only 25, stayed to raise Daniel on her own instead of leaving with the family's money. Now Daniel was 25 and his stepmother was only 35. When I met her in my past life, I just assumed she aged incredibly well. On our wedding night, she kept finding excuses to come into our bedroom. When I finally moved to lock the door, Daniel stopped me. "She and I have been together for over 20 years, he explained. "Now that I'm married, she's having a hard time adjusting. Please be patient with her." She came and went as she pleased, and because Daniel claimed my health was too poor, we never consummated our marriage. He would coax me to sleep early, but I could never rest well in a new place. Half awake, I realized Daniel had quietly left the room at some point. Though I couldn't walk far, I could manage a few steps. I got out of bed and followed the sound of his voice. That night, standing outside a closed door, I saw him holding his stepmother in his arms as she whispered, "If it weren't for needing the startup money from the Morgans, we wouldn't have to go through this." At the time, I thought their relationship, however strange, was more genuine than my mother's blatant favoritism or my father's selfish ambition. There was something almost enviable about their closeness. Because of my weak constitution, I assumed I could never get pregnant, so I never took precautions. But after just 2 encounters, I was carrying Daniel's child. I remember hearing his stepmother scolding him, saying I was already 2 months along. For the rest of my pregnancy, she was gone, having fled back to her family's home. My own mother ignored me, and my father felt the $5 million he gave Daniel as a wedding gift was more than enough to repay his debt to the Vance family. I went into the delivery room alone. The labor was difficult, and I lost a great deal of blood. I could hear Daniel outside, begging the doctors to save the baby. But fate was cruel. The child was stillborn. The doctors said my body had been too frail to provide enough nutrition. While I was still lost in a fog of grief, Daniel's stepmother reappeared, holding a newborn. Chloe, she said, I know you must be devastated. I brought a baby back from my hometown for you to raise. How could she think I would want to raise a stranger's child after losing my own? But Daniel didn't care about my feelings. He happily went to register the child's birth certificate. That was the first time I saw his household registration book, which clearly stated he and his stepmother were only 10 years apart. It was then, with the help of my father's $5 million, that Daniel's company became a force to be reckoned with. The Vance family's star rose. To protect their new reputation, they couldn't let the truth of my stillbirth become public. I remember Daniel holding my hand, whispering, "This child will be ours now. Everything is arranged. No one will ever know." He glanced at my pale, grief-stricken face. "You scared me so badly during the delivery. Please promise me we won't have any more children. Your health is what's most important." Consumed by my loss, I didn't see the strange look on his face. To the outside world, including Isabelle, I had it all: a loving husband, a doting mother-in-law, and a beautiful child. Returning to this life, the depression from that loss still clung to me, making my already fragile health even worse. If I married into the Sterling family like this, they would probably think I was a curse. "Don't sigh," a voice said, startling me. Isabelle was back, full of energy. She tossed a bank card onto my lap. I stared at it for a long moment before picking it up. "What is this?" I asked. "Your dowry," she said with a shrug. "There's $2 million on it from Mom." Seeing my confusion, she gave me a radiant smile. "Chloe, don't think marrying into the Sterling family is a dream come true. They're about to go bankrupt. Hide this money and use it for your medical bills." She then knelt in front of my wheelchair, her eyes locking onto mine. "Daniel is going to be the richest man in the city. I'm going to be a wealthy socialite. If you need money, just ask me. I won't be heartless like you were. I'll actually help you." Seeing the bitterness in her expression, I finally understood. At the moment of her death, she must have been furious with me, believing that as the wife of the richest man, I had done nothing to save her. We were sisters, after all, but she never knew I had no power in that family, and on the day she died, I died too. A wave of sorrow washed over me, and before I could stop myself, the words came out. "Izzy, you have to be careful with Daniel and his mother." "What are you talking about?" She frowned, thinking I was just jealous. I didn't hesitate. I told her everything: the truth about Daniel and his stepmother, the stillbirth, the cover-up, and the fact that I had also died in our past life. I told her every last detail. Isabelle was silent for a long time. Then, to my surprise, she stood up and pulled me into a fierce hug. "They dared to bully you?" she growled. "Just watch how I deal with them." My nose stung with unshed tears. That hug, a hug that should have belonged to our sisterhood, had come almost a lifetime too late. The tragedy was that even knowing we were walking into a storm, we had no choice but to step into it. The day after Isabelle and I held our separate weddings, we returned to our family home for the customary visit. Just as Isabelle had predicted, Leo was quiet and reserved, while Isabelle was as lively as ever. In their previous life, they had found each other unbearable. Now, even after marrying me, Leo's demeanor was unchanged. Because of my fragile emotional state, I had refused to share a bed with him on our wedding night. He didn't seem to mind and rose early to accompany me home. To my surprise, Daniel came with Isabelle. In my past life, his stepmother had found every excuse to keep him from visiting with me. "Do you want to talk to your sister?" a deep, steady voice asked from beside me. I turned, startled. It was Leo. Our eyes met for a brief second before I nodded and looked away. He pushed my wheelchair over to where Isabelle was standing, then made an excuse and left with Daniel. "Chloe, I tormented that wicked woman last night," Isabelle whispered playfully, squatting in front of me. Having been warned, she was prepared for Daniel's stepmother to constantly interrupt them. Isabelle had boldly played inappropriate videos at full volume on her phone. Even a woman as shameless as her couldn't handle the sounds, and she finally retreated. All night, Isabelle clung to Daniel, giving him no chance to slip away to his stepmother's room. "You should have heard her sobbing this morning," Isabelle said, rolling her eyes. "This morning, she faked an illness to keep Daniel from coming with me, so I called 911 right in front of her. I told her we weren't doctors, and if she was sick, She needed a hospital. Daniel, unable to handle the scene, agreed to come. Listening to her story, I felt a deep unease. Daniel is exactly your type, the charming, cunning kind, I warned her. You can't fall for him. Please, she waved a hand dismissively. I'll divorce him once he's the richest man in the city, take half his money and use it to find a cure for you. She was already dreaming of the future, but I knew Daniel and his stepmother were not so easily beaten. If we repeated the tragedies of our past, there would be no one to save us. After our visit, I asked Leo to sit down with me. You want me to convince my grandmother not to invest in crypto? He asked, frowning. In our past life, Sterling Enterprises had nearly collapsed because of her bad investments. I nodded and told him a new government policy was coming that would ban cryptocurrency trading. If his grandmother kept buying it, she would be forced to sell at a massive loss, devastating the company. How do you know this? He asked, his eyes full of suspicion. The whole country has gone crazy for it, I said, meeting his gaze. Trust me, the government will have to intervene. After a night of consideration, Leo took me to see his grandmother. Grandma, your instincts were right, he said with an uncharacteristic smile. The wife I married is a blessing to our family. I had never seen this side of him. For his grandmother, crypto was just a trend. She didn't hesitate long before agreeing to pull their funds out. Only then did my heart settle. I was using my knowledge of the past to stabilize the Sterling family so that one day I would have the power to stand against Daniel. That way, if Isabelle ever needed to escape her marriage, I could take her in. Some time passed, then, just as Leo had almost forgotten our conversation, the government issued the policy. Cryptocurrency trading was banned. Those who had hoarded it were ruined overnight. Chloe, thank you, Leo said, giving me a rare, sincere smile. If it weren't for you, Grandma would have suffered a terrible blow. I smiled back softly. What reassured me most was that everything was still happening in the same order as before. Leo was staring at my lips, a dazed look on his face. This is the first time I've seen you smile, he said. It's the first time I've seen you smile too, I thought. Our eyes met and we both smiled again. The air between us grew warm and intimate. He leaned down slowly, moving closer, but just then, my phone rang, shattering the moment. It was Isabelle. Leo looked flustered and quietly left the room. Bad news, she said as soon as I answered. I'm pregnant. I froze. What? It was from that one night, she stammered. I didn't think. We were so drunk. As I listened, a memory surfaced. My first time with Daniel in our past life had also been after he was drunk. A chill went through me, but I comforted her. Your body is much stronger than mine. The baby will be fine. But I don't know if I want it, she admitted. Her hesitation worried me. In my past life, I had wanted that child more than anything, and he had never even opened his eyes. I didn't push my grief onto her. I just told her I would support whatever she decided. As I sat there lost in thought, Leo returned with an empty suitcase. What's happening? I asked. A last-minute trip abroad for a project, he replied, stuffing clothes into the bag. I realized that in the months we'd been married, I had never once acted like a wife. Without a word, I got out of my wheelchair, knelt beside him, and placed my hand over his. Let me help you. Leo looked at me, stunned. You can walk, he blurted out. I couldn't help but laugh. You thought I was completely immobile? I'm sorry, he said earnestly. I didn't mean it like that. His sincerity made me pause. A doubt pricked at me. You don't even know me. If your grandmother liked someone's birth chart, would you have married them, no matter who they were? He was silent for a long minute. Yes, he finally said. Grandma raised me. She built this company. I would do anything to make her happy. I would have spent my life with that person out of respect. He paused. But now, something unexpected has happened. My heart hammered at his quiet confession. Just before he left, he pressed me against the door, his breath warm against my skin. Chloe, wait for me, he whispered. Later that night, I tried to recall all the bitterness of my past to cool the memory of that moment. Isabelle's pregnancy timeline matched mine exactly, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Daniel was doing this on purpose. And Leo, I hadn't paid much attention to him in my past life. I couldn't remember the second major mistake his grandmother had made, only that it was connected to a country called Valoria. Thinking of Leo's trip abroad, I quickly called him. "Chloe, I just got to the airport. Do you miss me already?" He teased. "Who arranged this trip? Where are you going?" I asked urgently. He sounded puzzled but answered, "Grandma did. She set up a meeting with the Valorian government." My chest tightened. Without explaining, I yelled into the phone, "Come home! Come home right now!" There was a pause, then his voice was firm. "Chloe, I'm coming home." Not long after, I heard his car pull into the driveway. I rushed downstairs on unsteady legs. The moment I saw him, the words tumbled out. "Valoria is tricking companies. They take the investment funds and then break the contracts. It's a trap." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he pressed his head into the curve of my neck, nuzzling against me. "Chloe," he whispered, "I'm just happy you told me to come home." Seeing my serious expression, he finally stopped teasing. "So, how did you know?" I couldn't tell him the truth. The sorrow on my face must have been obvious because he didn't push. He just wrapped his arms around me. "Whatever you say, I'll believe you." The next morning, he took me with him to explain the canceled trip to his grandmother, taking full responsibility and presenting evidence of Valoria's untrustworthy practices. Soon after, news broke that Valoria had scammed another major corporation. Realizing her judgment was failing, his grandmother officially stepped down and named Leo the new chairman of Sterling Enterprises. With the two biggest crises averted, I finally felt like I could breathe. I realized it had been a while since I'd heard from Isabelle, so I had Leo drive me to the Vance house. Seeing my sister's round belly and her peaceful smile, my heart ached. "I thought you didn't want to keep it," I said. She smiled faintly. I hesitated, but once I felt the baby kick, I couldn't let go. She looked tired. I helped her to the couch. "And Daniel and his stepmother?" I asked. "Just like you said. After she found out I was pregnant, she ran back to her family. As for Daniel, he's out charming someone at some banquet." She stroked her belly. My vibrant sister was now grounded by pregnancy. At least this time, our parents sent her money regularly, and she had managed to take control of Daniel's company finances. "That old witch keeps trying to get money from me, but I shut her down every time," she said with a cold smirk. Seeing her so much stronger, I finally felt at ease. Now I had to help Leo face his final challenge. "Izzy, do you remember how Leo went bankrupt last time?" She wrinkled her nose. "How would I know? I think it was a research project. One of his partners betrayed him." Her words sent a chill through me. She nudged me, grinning. "What, trying to be his guardian angel this time?" Before long, Isabelle's due date arrived. She suffered a difficult labor and heavy bleeding. I paced outside the operating room with our parents. Daniel, just like in the last life, was a mess, begging the doctors to save the baby. Watching him, I felt a strange sense of unease. Thankfully, Isabelle and the baby survived, but we never got to see him. He was transferred immediately to the NICU. "He's in critical condition," the doctor told us. "He'll be in an incubator for at least a month." A chilling premonition washed over me. I asked Leo to have someone guard the neonatal unit around the clock. Meanwhile, Leo was in the final stages of a major research project and was rarely home. I decided to stay with Isabelle at the hospital. "Chloe!" her weak voice called out. I rushed to her side. She looked at me for a long moment. "Am I being selfish?" she asked softly. "When I woke up in this life, all I wanted was to trade places with you, but now I want to protect you. Leo's project. He's going to be betrayed. The person he trusts most was already bought by Daniel. I've known all along." She looked away, ashamed. "I didn't like Leo, and I married Daniel, so I wanted him to succeed. I should have told you sooner." Tears streamed down my face, and I hugged her. "You died so unfairly, Izzy. I understand. But this time, we're both going to live." "Tell Leo," she urged. "Warn him." I tried calling Leo again and again, but the calls wouldn't go through. "Go on, take a cab," Isabelle insisted. "I'll be fine." I hesitated, but she persuaded me. I rushed out of the hospital. If I had known what would happen in my absence, I never would have left. When I burst into Leo's office, he was about to sign a contract. "Check the fine print again," I said, panting. "There's a hidden clause. It's a trap." Leo was calm. He told me he'd already discovered that Daniel had bribed an employee. "You rushed all the way here because you were worried about me?" he asked, his eyes shining. He then pulled me into the conference room. "This is my wife," he announced to his team. "She's the one who helped us avoid multiple crises." The room burst into applause. This marriage, once a simple arrangement, was being reshaped by his quiet devotion. "Chloe," he whispered, "I'll protect you and your sister. Don't ever think about leaving me." Just as I was reeling from his words, my phone rang. It was the guard from the hospital. "Mrs. Sterling, I'm so sorry. I just went to the restroom, and when I got back, the hospital said the baby had died." The world tilted. Leo saw the color drain from my face and rushed me back to the hospital. As we approached Isabelle's room, we could hear her screaming. "Give me back my son!" A cold voice replied, "Ma'am, we did everything we could." It felt like a nightmare repeating itself. I had saved Leo from every disaster. Why couldn't I save Isabelle? Just then, Daniel and his stepmother arrived. She was holding a small bassinet. "Chloe, you're here," she said with a forced smile. "I heard about Isabelle, so I brought this baby from my village to help ease her pain." My eyes narrowed. Isabelle and I lost our children on different days. How did she manage to show up today with a baby already in hand? My mind raced with dark suspicions. Daniel repeated the same excuse to Isabelle, who erupted. "Get out! All of you, get out!" She screamed at them, then turned to Leo, her voice hoarse. "If you ever want things to be right between you and Chloe, help me kill them." Leo's bodyguards immediately escorted Daniel and his stepmother out. Sobbing in my arms, Isabelle cried, "Chloe, now I finally understand how you must have felt." Isabelle's baby had been in an incubator for 2 weeks with no updates. Now, the hospital presented her with a deceased infant and expected her to accept it. "Should we do a DNA test?" I suggested gently. Daniel, who had overheard, exploded. "That's my son! You want to stick needles in him now?" Leo stepped forward, but Isabelle cut him off. "I want the test." The results came back quickly. The deceased infant was indeed Daniel's biological child. But something was wrong. "Why wasn't the test run with Isabelle's DNA?" I asked. The first person to snap at me was my own mother. "What kind of cruel thing is that to say right now?" she hissed, her face full of disgust. "You're just trying to torment her." Her words were like a physical blow. "Mom, She's just worried, Mom," Isabelle said weakly. But my mother wouldn't stop. "I just hate that gloomy look on her face, like the whole world has wronged her." Behind Isabelle's back, Daniel had the child cremated. When she found out, she collapsed. At that moment, my suspicion hardened into certainty. I asked Leo to have Daniel and his stepmother watched. Soon, we had a photo of her in a bedroom, nursing the baby she claimed was from her village. If she could lactate, she had likely just given birth. Whose child was she holding? Chills ran down my spine. Had I been tricked the same way in my past life? Leo ordered a DNA test. The results confirmed it. The baby was biologically hers and Daniel's. So where was Isabelle's son? Security footage from the hospital revealed everything. A person in a white coat entering the NICU with one baby and leaving with another. That person was tracked to a remote village, and inside a dilapidated house, they found Isabelle's real son, alive. With the evidence, the stepmother confessed the entire plan. Their relationship could never be public, so they planned to switch any child Daniel had with his wife for the one he had with her. The other baby was supposed to be killed, but she couldn't go through with it and abandoned him instead. The most disgusting part was their long-term plan. After some time, Daniel would find a way to quietly get rid of Isabelle, leaving them free to be a family, so that was it. That's how I died. The dark cloud that had hung over me for so long finally lifted. "Chloe, thank you," Isabelle whispered, holding her baby tightly, tears of relief streaming down her face. "If it wasn't for you and Leo, I would have died never knowing the truth." Our mother stood nearby, avoiding my gaze in shame. "What will you do now?" I asked Isabelle. She gave a small, carefree smile. When you got married, I gave you 2 million. Now it's your turn to return the favor. I chuckled. 2 million? Try 200 million. Sterling Enterprises was now the most powerful conglomerate in the city. Daniel and his stepmother were convicted and would spend the rest of their lives in prison. Isabelle refused to live with us, so our parents took her and the baby home. She swore she was done with men for good. 2 years later, I safely gave birth to my first child with Leo. Looking back, I knew the arrangement we started with was long gone. What had begun as a contract had become the true beginning of our life together.